All right. Once again, still Ms. Hunt for the plaintiff, Ms. White for the defense. 175 from here to the end, a little cool down. I'll ask the question and we'll set on 28. Here we go. And how about 18? And how about 18?
That would be another view of the same place where the defendant was when we first entered.
Now, I want to ask you about what you found when you entered the garage. You testified earlier that you had been observing the defendant for some time.
Yes, that's correct.
How was it that you were first connected to the defendant?
Objection vague.
Sustained.
What was it that brought you to be outside his home that morning?
We had been monitoring drug activity in the neighborhood and had traced some of the sales to that address.
Did you have any knowledge before that day of what kind of drugs you were expecting to find at that residence?
Yes.
Did you expect to find cocaine?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Let me go back and start it this way. You testified before that you had the information from Officer Brown that the defendant had sold him drugs. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Tell the jury now who Officer Brown is.
He is a police officer for the Anaheim Police Department, and he was working as an undercover officer.
All right, now is he your partner?
He is not my partner, but we do work for the same department.
All right, now without telling us what Officer Brown relayed to you, were you of the opinion that the defendant was dealing drugs out of his home?
Yes.
Had you observed any drug transactions yourself between the defendant and Officer Brown?
Yes, I had.
All right, tell us approximately how many you had knowledge of.
Objection vague. Your Honor, this deals with subject matter that we discussed before.
All right.
If we could have a time frame, I think that would take care of the objection.
Counsel, perhaps you can raise your question.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Officer, in the 3 months before the defendant's arrest, how many transactions did you observe between defendant and Officer Brown?
I would estimate that there were approximately 10.
And those would be times where Officer Brown was buying drugs from the defendant?
Yes.
What drugs did he buy in his undercover role?
It was mostly cocaine, but there was also marijuana and some meth.
All right, now when you made entry to the defendant's home, tell us what you saw.
The defendant and the other male were packaging cocaine.
What did you see on the work table in front of the defendant as you approached him?
There were several small bundles of a white substance immediately in front of him. There was also a scale and packaging materials.
Now, I assume that the defendant was removed from the residence at some point. Is that...
Yes.
Was he arrested?
Yes, both subjects were arrested eventually.
Okay, did you conduct a search at that time?
Yes, we did.
Were you involved in that search?
I was, that's correct.
What else found on that day?
Do you mean just in the garage or the entire house?
Let's start with the garage where the defendant was standing. If you could start with the work table area where you observed the defendant. Was there something else that you saw on that table?
Yes, in addition to the drugs, there was also a box of ammunition on the table.
What kind of ammunition are we talking about?
There was a box of shotgun shells to the right of the table. Right above the table was a shelf that had a loaded shotgun.
Was that within reach from where the defendant was standing?
Objection speculation.
Sustained.
Well, how tall was the shelf where you observed the gun?
I would estimate that it was approximately 8 feet off the ground.
Shotgun as you reached the garage.
Yes, I did.
Is that one of the reasons why you asked to have the defendant's hands where you could see them?
Well, that's standard whenever we are approaching suspects, but the knowledge that there were weapons in the garage is also a consideration.
Did you have knowledge before that day that the defendant would have weapons in his possession?
Yes, I did.
Did that come from Officer Brown?
Objection calls for hearsay.
I will withdraw the question, Your Honor.
All right. It is withdrawn.
I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
All right. Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. If I could just have a moment before I begin.
Yes, that's fine.
Officer, I want to ask you some questions about your surveillance of my client's home.
All right.
You testified before that you arrived on the scene at approximately 6 o'clock that morning. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
Where did you position yourself upon arrival?
I was in the police van that was parked down the street from the defendant's location.
Did you arrive at that location in that van?
No, the van was there before I arrived. I was in an unmarked vehicle. I parked around the corner and then walked to the van.
So you were familiar with where the van was parked before you arrived there?
Yes.
How did you know where the van was when you arrived there?
Objection, irrelevant.
Overruled. You may answer.
I was in telephone contact with the officers in the van. I already knew what the van looked like, so it wasn't hard to find.
All right, describe what kind of an automobile this is for the jury, please.